It's the Buckeye State or Bust this Labor Day. Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton both holding events in the key battleground of Ohio as we enter a crucial stretch of the campaign. And time is of the essence now, with only a little more than 2 months until Election Day. Good morning, everyone. Happy Labor Day. I'm Greg Jarrett, live in America's Newsroom.
Good to be with you, Greg.
Good to be here.
Happy Labor Day to all of you. I'm Abby Huntsman. Bill and Martha are off, and that's where we begin. Ohio, as we know, is a bellwether state every presidential year. And according to the Real Clear Politics average, Trump is right in the thick of things, trailing Clinton by only about 3 points. Trump also cutting into her lead nationally, now within single digits as the candidates hit the trail hard in their final sprint for the White House. And that is where we find Peter Ducey is live in Canfield, Ohio. And Peter, as you know, never a dull moment on the trail. Now Donald Trump and Arizona Senator Jeff Flake are fighting. What is going on here?
What's going on is that Trump doesn't think Flake has given him enough support in his home state out west. So last night, Donald Trump took to Twitter and he wrote that, quote, "The great state of Arizona, where I just had a massive rally, amazing people, has a very weak and ineffective Senator, Jeff Flake. Sad." And that came a few hours after Senator Flake said this.
Republican nominee, I just don't see how I can.
That inter-party back and forth came after Trump did some outreach that's rare for a Republican nominee this close to an election. He visited a black church in Detroit's inner city and called for a new civil rights agenda during some brief remarks there, basically promising to bring his business expertise to the inner city to create jobs and improve schools and places that badly need both. Trump also sympathized with the lifelong struggles with discrimination of the people that he was speaking to have endured, and his remarks seem to be very well received by an enthusiastic audience there. Abby?
Well, they're both in Ohio today, as you said, Peter. How closely are people paying attention to their visit? What, we're a little more than 60 days now before the election. Can you believe it?
You know what? It's hard for voters here in Ohio, one of the most important swing states, to avoid stuff this holiday weekend like this. We're at the Canfield County Fair. It's the biggest county fair in Ohio, and they're building a wall. Mexico's not paying for this one, of course. People who donate $5 can get a brick, and they're building these things. We came yesterday, and people wanted pictures with this or wanted bricks to buy to write stuff on. As much as anything else, as much as any other attraction at the fair, this has been getting a lot of attention. So to answer your question, it seems like people here are paying very close attention on the now unofficial kickoff to the final leg of the campaign. Abby?
I love it. I love it. All right, Peter, live for us in Canfield, Ohio this morning. Peter, thanks.
In the meantime, Hillary Clinton's campaign is certainly on the defense right now amid startling new revelations in her email scandal. The FBI summary of its investigation showing that a laptop computer that held an archive of her emails when she was Secretary of State, poof, vanished. It went missing after being put in the mail. Well, her running mate, Senator Tim Kaine, defending her, while also admitting that Clinton didn't make the right choices.
What these notes demonstrate is in very significant detail why the FBI chose not to go forward with any additional proceeding. She did make a mistake, and she made it by deciding she wanted to use one device rather than multiple devices. She's apologized for that. She said it was a mistake, and she's learned from it.
One device? He clearly hasn't read the FBI notes. Katie Pavlich joins us, news editor of townhall.com and a Fox News contributor. All right, so he's way off by a factor of 13 on the number of devices she was using, and she got grilled on that by the FBI. So it was up to Chris Christie, Trump advisor, to try to straighten Kaine out. Here he is. Is Kaine's misdirection, or dare I say it, dishonesty, if that's what it really is, the same thing that has been dogging the Hillary Clinton campaign, and he's not helping?
Look, the cover-up continues. I mean, it's in black and white, the facts of the case and what the FBI found surrounding Hillary Clinton's email case. As you just stated, there were 13 devices that were used. There were 5 different iPads used, 3 of which were turned over to the FBI, 2 are missing. As you said at the top of the segment, there is a laptop that was mailed by a Clinton staffer that was by the way, a Clinton Foundation laptop that contained Hillary Clinton's entire State Department archive. So there's that connection. But was put in the mail and somehow lost before it got to Hillary Clinton. I mean, the American people look at this and go, how is someone like this getting away with it? And then you add on to this that the Clinton archive was deleted and swiped 2 weeks after the New York Times revealed to the country that she was, in fact, using a private server. And if that's not intent, I'm not sure what is.
What's really striking about these FBI notes of her interview is that she seems utterly oblivious about how to do her job in handling classified documents. She didn't know that C meant classified. She said, I don't recall roughly 40 times, didn't recall classified training, briefings, didn't recall even getting classified security clearance. Couldn't determine how classification happens, couldn't identify clearly classified documents when they were presented to her by the FBI. If she is not competent to handle classified materials as Secretary of State, how is she competent to be president?
Well, there's two issues here. The first is that Hillary argues in this FBI interview that she believed the C classification didn't stand for classified information, but that, in fact, it stood for alphabetizing these emails as a way to organize the emails in
except there was no A,
order.
B, and D,
there was no
and
A, B,
F.
C, D, E. It never went on. Right, exactly. That's the first problem. The second problem is that Hillary Clinton was the First Lady. She was a senator from New York. She was the Secretary of State. For her to argue to the American people that she didn't know how to classify information, what classified information was, and for her to argue that to the FBI is not only untrue, but it's laughable and an insult. It's insulting to the American people's intelligence. They're not stupid. They look at this and say, how is it that she got away with this in terms of saying that she was ignorant, pleading ignorance? That's not a defense for the American people. It certainly is for her.
You know, Tim Kaine also said, look, you know, in the Senate, it's really hard to determine classified documents. Well, that's not the case here. She was confronted with documents showing an advanced military drone strike against an enemy, and she said, well, A, I don't remember that, and B, yeah, I didn't know if that was classified or not. Really?
Well, Greg, when you have bleach bit and hammers involved, it's very clear what the intention here was to destroy the evidence of what went on. There was obviously a lot of coordination between the Clinton Foundation and Hillary Clinton. There was classified information on her private server, which, of course, the reason the FBI investigated that is because that is a federal crime if you were, found to have done it intentionally. There weren't a lot of questions about intent here, but it's clear. Right, gross negligence.
It's not just intent, gross negligence.
Many of her BlackBerries are still missing. I mean, you look at the details of this and you go, how is it that they came to the conclusion that she didn't deserve prosecution?
Indeed. That's really the million-dollar question. Katie Pavlich, thank you for being with us this Labor Day.
Thanks, Greg.
Good to see you.
You too.
Well, some breaking news overseas. President Obama wrapping up his meeting with Vladimir Putin on the sidelines of the G20 summit in China and failing to reach an agreement with the Russian president on how to end the bloodshed in Syria. President Obama saying the tone of the talks was not an easy one, even as both leaders vowed to keep working toward a deal. Listen.
Typically, the tone of our meetings are candid, blunt, and this one was no different. We had a range of issues that we had to discuss, but the two most important were, as has been reported, discussions that have been taking place between Secretary Kerry and Russia's Foreign Minister, Sergei Lavrov, about ways in which we can institute a meaningful, serious, verifiable cessation of hostilities in Syria.
Question now, can the U.S. and Russia ever come to terms in Syria? We're going to discuss with Katie McFarland a little later in America's Newsroom. Well, it has now been 9 months since Hillary Clinton last held an official news conference. That was back in December, and she's getting lots of backlash for that. But her running mate, Tim Kaine, he's firing back. Listen.
She's had hundreds of interviews in the last year, and I got to push back on the notion that she hasn't done a press conference. She gave a speech to the National Association of Black Journalists within the last month, where there were also journalists, Hispanic journalists there, and she did a press conference there. And members of mainstream media outlets, television networks, asked her questions during that press conference.
For more, let's bring in our panel. Molly Hemingway, senior editor for The Federalist, and Jessica Tarlov, Democratic pollster and strategist, and a senior political analyst for Stone Consulting. Good morning, ladies. Happy Labor Day.
Happy Labor Day.
Thanks for being with us. So, Molly, you know, Tim Kaine's in a tough position. How do you answer that question when asked, you know, why has she not given a press conference in what now 275 days? There's no good answer. The problem is it almost is like he made it worse by saying that.
Right. It's really not good for him to show the same levels of trouble with truth-telling that his running mate has. And point of fact, that was not a press conference. Yes, it was a speech given to journalists, but it was a group so biased that they erupted in applause a dozen times during the speech. And then the question and answer period was itself moderated. That's not what a press conference is. A press conference requires free and open exchange between the press and the candidate, not a tightly scripted event. And it's important, I think, for Tim Kaine to be able to retain his ability to tell the truth even while he's running with Hillary Clinton. And I think that's actually important for their campaign.
Jessica, why not? I think that's the big question here, is why has it been so long since she has held some sort of formal press conference? When you're running for president of the United States, you understand it before she officially announced and all that. Now we're in the general election. Right. She's ahead in the polls nationally. Why not get out there and talk to the American people?
Well, I think that, first of all, we know that Hillary Clinton is not a fantastic campaigner. This is something she's discussed herself and, you know, says, I'm going to be a great president, but I'm not as good on the trail as an Obama or her own husband. So I think there's that. And I think that, frankly, she doesn't want to answer questions about her email server or the Clinton Foundation. And the campaign has over and over again made it clear that they've answered all of these questions and they have their story and they're sticking to it. And I agree completely with Molly, not about the truth-telling part, but I think it would be really smart for her to do this, to answer those questions and to spend the time doing that. I think back often to when President Obama said about the threat that we're facing from ISIS. And he said, I didn't know that the American people were so scared, right, until I started watching cable news. And the truth of the matter is whether she's telling the truth or not, and she is telling the truth about a lot of things, the American people feel that she has an honesty problem, and her favorability numbers are dropping right now.
And
so
that's
the
what
best
I was
thing
just
she
going
can
to say.
do is to get out there.
If there's any reason to speak out, it's to build that trust. As you said, where she continues to struggle. You look at our most recent Fox News poll, you look at it there, I mean, 66% say no when it comes to trustworthiness. I mean, you look at those numbers, Molly, it seems like she has every reason to do a press conference.
Right. This is one of those areas where, you know, both candidates have a lot of problems, but this is an area where a lot of the media focus on Donald Trump's problems in terms of how much the public likes him. People like Hillary Clinton even less. And whatever else you want to say about him, he is accessible to the media. He does answer questions. And that is a huge problem for a woman who just had, you know, a Friday news dump that showed that the FBI discovered all sorts of things that I think Americans are very troubled with. Her claim that she didn't know that the C stood for classified, for confidential in her emails, indications that there might have been obstruction of justice and whatnot. This is an area where she really needs to answer more questions, not be more restricted. And also, a campaign is usually when people are most accessible to the press. The idea that she would somehow become president and
gives you some insight into how an administration might be. But I do,
in all fairness, Donald Trump bans press outlets that he's not interested in hearing from. I mean,
he has his own strategy with the press. I will give you that. But I will say that he does speak to a number of the press, more than we've seen most candidates do that. But it is interesting today is she officially gets her campaign plane, Jessica, which means they're going to be press flying with her everywhere. How does she avoid that?
Oh, no, she doesn't avoid it. I think that this was actually, you know, a deliberate move to make sure that she would be with the press more to counter this. I mean, I think that right now in these final 2 months, she's going into Labor Day, as you noted, ahead in the polls. It's tight, but she's still ahead, and she has great leads in some swing states that she needs. I think that she's going to be more open because she knows that she has to be. And I think that what the Clintons need to do, the Clinton campaign for the last 2 months, is take away any negative talking point that they can from the other side. And this kind of where's Hillary talking point is one that's hurt her. And I'm going to give a shout out to my dad right now who came up with a great idea. It's called Operation Hillary Sunshine. And she vows to give a press conference every week or do a town hall until the election.
All right.
And put herself out there.
I think that's really good advice. We're going to have to leave it there.
My dad's a genius.
Tell your dad it's some good advice. Ladies, thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Mutual Insurance.
Welcome back, and you're looking live now at Vice President Joe Biden speaking now in Pittsburgh on Labor Day. He's talking about Pennsylvania and how he considers it a second home for him. As we know, one of the all-important states to win in just a little more than 60 days now. We'll keep a close eye on that.
Well, the bloodshed in Syria continues after President Obama and Russian President Vladimir Putin failed to reach an agreement on a ceasefire. The two leaders meeting on the sidelines of the G20 summit in China and vowing to keep searching for a deal that ends the war in Syria. In the meantime, Democratic vice presidential nominee Tim Kaine putting the blame squarely on Russia.
I don't believe in a blame America first strategy. Russia went into Georgia, the South Ossetia region of Georgia, when President Bush was in office, before President Obama was elected. And he went into Crimea during the Obama administration. But to try to say that's the U.S.'s fault is ridiculous. The guy is a dictator who represses journalists.
Is it ridiculous for the U.S. to bear some blame? KT McFarland, a Fox News national security analyst and a former Deputy Assistant Secretary of State in the Reagan administration. KT, great to see you. Happy Labor Day. Over the last couple of days, I spoke to several experts who both seem to reach the same agreement that President Obama is getting played here by Vladimir Putin. What do you think?
Well, played by Vladimir Putin, played by the Russians, played by the Chinese, played by the North Koreans, played by the Iranians. So, yeah, I think the United States does bear a good bit of the blame because they've allowed themselves to get blamed and played. You know, the leading from behind strategy of President Obama, it's now starting to show dividends. We're being left behind and we're being pushed around. And they may be insignificant things like the Chinese couldn't find a staircase to bring up to the plane when President Obama landed in China. But they could be more significant things, like the Russians basically telling the United States, look, if you guys are in the way, we're going to bomb you. And no additional ability of the United States to have any leverage to calm them down.
Well, in the fight against ISIS and trying to remove Bashar al-Assad in Syria, which, by the way, is President Obama's firm position, that's anathema to the Russians. Was there any hope of a deal here with them?
I don't think so. You know, look, we're deluding ourselves to thinking that we're players now in the Middle East. There are two sides left in the Middle East. One is a side that's Russia, Iran, and Assad. We're saying, no, Assad has to go. The second side is ISIS. Well, nobody's for them, right? But we're somehow this mythical third force where we want Assad to go, we want to defeat ISIS, but we're kind of standing there all by ourselves, stuck in the middle of this civil war. And we're really not in a position to play in the Middle East anymore. We've ceded that position to the Russians and to the Iranians. And the problems of the Middle East today are not going to be solved by President Obama or even Secretary Kerry or even potentially President Clinton sitting down and trying to talk to the Russians. The Russians are just running circles around the United States foreign policy at this point.
And are they also hacking into our systems and trying to interfere in the U.S. election?
You know what really was stunning to me, Greg, is when Vladimir Putin was asked, are you hacking into the American election system? Are you doing something with the Democrat? What are you doing? And he said, no government state entity is hacking into the American elections. And then he smiled. Well, what more proof do you need? I don't think Putin has decided he wants this candidate or that candidate. I think he just wants to scramble it. I think he wants to interfere with our electoral process. He wants to hack into it. He wants to embarrass us. And then he wants to sit back and watch us kind of fumble to figure out what's next.
Yeah, he also said, oh, gee, what does it matter who did the hacking as long as the information was made public, which is the same thing as, gee, we did it. I want to ask you, because you brought it up. Okay, so President Obama arrives in Hangzhou, China for the big G20 summit. Lots of talk planned about global economic growth there. Every single leader of every nation who is attending gets a red carpet treatment. Not only did they not pull out the red carpet for President Obama, they didn't even pull out the staircase. You know, he had to get off the back of the plane at one of his own staircases. What's going on? And by the way, before you answer that, let me play this little clip. There he is coming off the plane, the back of the plane. There's this almost fisticuffs going on the tarmac between a couple of officials. Take a listen. They were keeping Obama officials away from President Obama. Susan Rice standing off in the corner, and they're not even letting her come close to President Obama. What do you think's going on here?
Well, the Chinese are saying, oh, it was a big mistake. We didn't really mean to do it. They deliberately did that. They deliberately humiliated him 3 times. One, they didn't give him plane stairs to walk off the plane. Number two, they kept his national security advisor, who they knew who she was. They kept her away from him. And three, they manhandled the American media. Now, it's a slight, and for the Chinese to do that, in China, things like insults and losing face, that's a big deal. That was telegraphed all over the world and certainly all over Asia.
Why would they do that? Do they have nothing but contempt for the U.S. or for President Obama?
Push him around, a little bit of contempt. Let's show him who's boss. Let's show him who's in charge. Let's show him that America's a declining world power, China's a rising world power. President Obama should have stayed on that plane until the steps came, and if the steps didn't come, the plane should have taken off and gone somewhere else. The minute you start subjecting yourself in and sort of laughing off these humiliations, more humiliations happen. That's why I think for the rest of the Obama administration, the countries and our enemies, they're going to grab what they can while the grabbing's good.
KT McFarland, thank you very much for being with us this Labor Day. Have a great day.
Thanks, Greg.
All right.
All right. Well, meanwhile, President Obama making a trans-Pacific trade deal one of his top priorities during his last few months in office, but neither candidate hoping for his job is too thrilled about continuing that push. Mr. Obama, though, saying that doesn't really matter.
I don't have to sell it to Asian leaders here who were part of the negotiations because they see this as the right thing to do for their own countries. The United States has never had a smooth, uncontroversial path to ratifying trade deals, but they eventually get done. And it's my intention to get this one done because on the merits, it is smart for America to do it.
Steve Moore is here, economic advisor for the Donald Trump campaign, distinguished visiting fellow at the Heritage Foundation, and, of course, a Fox News contributor. Steve, good morning. Happy Labor Day.
Abby.
Thanks for being here.
Good morning.
All right, so first off, you look at President Obama, he's thinking about his legacy. He wants to get this passed. He said he's confident that it will. Hillary Clinton, originally for this trade deal, now being pushed by a lot of them, the Sanders supporters. Now she's against it. How much of us all talking about this now is simply politics?
Well, gee, politics this season? Who would have ever expected it? Yeah, well, Hillary's been all over the map on this issue. There's no question. I mean, in fact, she was at the State Department, helped negotiate this deal. Then in the Democratic primary, she turned against it, and it depends on what day you ask her whether she's for it or against it. Donald Trump has been pretty consistent. He says that if he is elected president, he will renegotiate this. I happen to agree with him. I'm a free trade guy, Abby, and I do think trade is important for the American economy, but I think there are a lot of defects in this deal. It doesn't take into account the interests of a lot of American workers, but also there's a big problem with these Asian countries that we sign these free trade deals with them. We open up our markets to them. They don't open up their markets to us. And the even bigger problem, and I think we need a negotiator like Donald Trump who will get tough with some of these Asian countries, especially China. They're stealing a lot of our technologies. There's some estimates, $300–400 billion a year of what we produce is being stolen, whether it's copyrighted materials or computer technologies, whether it's pharmaceutical drugs. We need them to pay for the things that we produce, and so this needs to be renegotiated.
And speaking of that, I mean, a lot of people are wondering, how does this impact my daily life? It's Labor Day today. A lot of people are sitting at home enjoying a day off of work, but also thinking about how important it is that they have a job. When you talk about the trade deal, a lot of people just don't understand the impact that would have on them personally. If any, talk to us about that impact and how we should be thinking about it.
Well, let's talk about what's good about trade, because, we learned this from Adam Smith 200 years ago, that when two parties, voluntary trade, they're both better off. And so there's no question. I mean, just go to Walmart and go to just about any store. Free trade makes goods and services more available to more people and at a cheaper and more affordable price. So that's the good thing about trade. The bad thing about trade is, again, that we seem to surrender at the negotiating table, and we don't require of these other countries to open their markets like we do. And so that has caused a lot of distress among American workers. I mean, I'll give you an amazing statistic. It just came out in Friday's jobs report, Abby. We lost manufacturing jobs and construction jobs on Friday's report. We have lost 1.5 million manufacturing jobs in the last 10 years. So there's a lot of anxiety out there among middle-class, working-class Americans. Now, I happen to think that some of this being targeted against trade is looking at the wrong source, but some of it is, losing jobs to China and some of these Asian countries. And this is going to be, it's an interesting election. Free trade is sort of on trial in this election with the American voters.
It really is such an interesting, unpredictable election. And this trade deal, I think, highlights that along with some of the other issues. Steve Moore, always good to see you. Thanks for being here.
Well, I want to make one other quick point. This is Labor Day, but what we need in this country is also to salute American employers because, ladies and gentlemen, without employers, you don't have workers and you don't have jobs. For all the men and women who start companies, we salute you today.
Well, I salute them as well. It's a great point, Steve. Thanks for making it.
Okay, Abby.
Lives here.
Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump not taking Labor Day off. Both are stumping in the critical swing state today of Ohio. Welcome to a brand new hour of America's Newsroom. Happy Labor Day. I'm Abby Huntsman in for Martha McCallum.
And I'm Greg Jarrett in for Bill Hemmer. So Donald Trump and his running mate Mike Pence will be back in Cleveland today. They're talking with union workers there. Hillary Clinton is also in Ohio, and for the very first time, she will be traveling with her press corps. Won't that be interesting? Her campaign rolling out this new, larger plane that can carry Clinton, her staff, as well as those pesky journalists. In the meantime, her husband, Bill Clinton, is pounding the pavement in Detroit. Literally, he's pounding it. He's marching in the Labor Day parade. More on that this morning.
Senior political correspondent Mike Emanuel is live for us in Cleveland. Mike, it has now been 275 days since Hillary Clinton did a news conference. When you're running for president, that is a really long time.
Well, Abby, you're right, and that's been since December 4th, 2015, more than 9 full months. But her running mate, Senator Tim Kaine, has been trying to push back on this whole lack of news conferences controversy.
She gave a speech to the National Association of Black Journalists within the last month, where there were also journalists, Hispanic journalists there, and she did a press conference there. And members of mainstream media outlets, television networks, asked her questions during that press conference.
To be clear, that was an event where she gave a speech and took a few questions, but not what those of us in the business would call a wide-ranging news conference. Abby?
Also, there's this ongoing, the questions regarding the Clinton Foundation, and now signs of tightening in the polls, as we've seen, Mike.
Well, that's right. There has been some tightening of the polls once we got through the post-convention bounces, and they have settled. Let's take a look at the Real Clear Politics average of recent polling here in the Buckeye State of Ohio. Hillary Clinton with a 3.8-point edge over Donald Trump. That suggests that both campaigns will invest a lot of time and energy here in Ohio in the remaining weeks. Meanwhile, as for the foundation, even Clinton's surrogates are having a hard time defending the future of the Clinton Foundation.
At the very least, she should not be involved.
On the Democratic side, it's all hands on deck today. Sanders will be campaigning solo for Hillary Clinton in New Hampshire. Bill Clinton campaigning in Detroit. And then you've got Hillary Clinton and Tim Kaine here in Cleveland for a big event this afternoon. Abby?
All right, Mike Emanuel live for us in Cleveland. Mike, thanks.
Arizona Senator Jeff Flake standing firm in his refusal to endorse Donald Trump even after the nominee's long-awaited immigration speech in the border state.
That day, he seemed to be right back where he has been.
Well, Donald Trump lashing out with this tweet, quote, the Republican Party needs strong and committed leaders, not weak people, such as Jeff Flake, if it's going to stop illegal immigration. Weak? Really? Jeff Flake? Charlie Kirk is founder and executive director of Turning Point USA. Carrie Sheffield is senior writer at Opportunity Lives and founder of Bold.global. Good to see you both. Carrie, Jeff Flake is the most honest person on Capitol Hill, many people say. I have no evidence to disagree. He's also about the nicest guy on Capitol Hill. If you can't get along with him, what does it say about Donald Trump?
I think it raises some serious questions. You know, I've known Jeff Flake for a long time, back even when he was in the House, and I completely agree with you. He is a true public servant. So Donald Trump, if I was advising his campaign, I would tell him, you win more flies with honey than you do with vinegar. And Donald Trump he's serving these huge bottles of vinegar, and I think that's the problem here. You know, he says he's the art of the deal king. Why doesn't he get a deal with with Senator Flake at this point. You know, he's a senator in a state that is a swing state. It should not be in play right now, but it is in play because of all the negatives and the things that Donald Trump has said about Latinos, who are 30% of the population in Arizona.
You know, Hillary Clinton, Charlie, said, you know, is there anybody left on Capitol Hill that he hasn't insulted, that Trump hasn't insulted? Who's he going to have left to work for? And it was the same sort of sentiment by Charles Blow in his editorial in the New York Times today. Trump, you were a chief birther against Obama, maligned Mexicans, slandered Muslims, treated women with disdain, mocked the handicap, applauded dictators, and encouraged the assault of protesters at your rally. I mean, it is sort of true that there a habit that if anybody dares to say something negative about Trump, he lashes out.
Sure, and I think we're getting the last phase of the campaign, and if I was advising Donald Trump, I would say this. Just hyper-focus on Hillary Clinton. You know, I think he actually had a pretty good week overall. You see the polls tightening. He's leading in Iowa now, but every time he kind of diverts from this focus on Hillary Clinton, that's when he starts to fall behind. And so if he just continues to focus on Hillary instead of going after other Republicans, and look, I personally would have liked to see, you know, Senator Flake get behind the Republican nominee, just like Senator Rubio did, people that were against Donald Trump many, many months ago. I think in some ways it creates a distraction heading into this very, very important election. But if I was Donald Trump, I would not take the bait. Just focus on Hillary Clinton going into these last 65 days, because this is a narrative that people really want to play into. And if you look at Hillary Clinton's Twitter account this morning, it's all about how Donald Trump is just lashing out against Senator Flake. It plays into this narrative that's already there.
If Hillary Clinton is hiding from the media and refusing to hold a news conference, arguably Donald Trump is hiding his tax returns, which brings us to topic number 2. The Trump campaign is giving us a little bit of an update on when we might expect to see the nominees' tax returns.
Issue here is, well, we'll see.
Kerry, the IRS says every citizen can make their tax returns public regardless of an audit. Is that just a vacuous excuse that the Trump campaign has come up with?
I agree. I think it's a fig leaf. I think Donald Trump is afraid of what's in there. We don't know what sort of foreign ties he might have. We don't know what sort of loopholes he might be exploiting. If he has nothing to hide, then show us. Let us know. You know, journalists, people like me, we believe in transparency. We believe in sunlight. That's why we don't like Hillary Clinton. Hillary Clinton is the queen of darkness in terms of, you know, no transparency, her shady servers, her shady emails. She's disqualified by what she did with mishandling the classified information. But Donald Trump, if you want to be head and shoulders above Hillary, then show your tax returns.
Yeah, and, you know, it does affect people, Charlie. People are suspicious about Trump because of it. In fact, we'll put up on the screen a Fox News poll that came out last week. 60% think that Trump is hiding something in his tax returns. Does he need to be transparent as he insists Clinton should be?
I think he should just release it and get it over with. However, I will say that the majority of the media, they hyper-focus on this idea that Trump needs to release the tax returns, and it's this continuous story. When not too long ago, you know, you saw Bernie Sanders railing against Hillary Clinton for not releasing the Goldman Sachs transcripts. You know, there's a lot that Hillary Clinton continually refuses to release. And so, yes, I do think Donald Trump should get the tax return story out there and get it done and said and over with. However, here's Hillary Clinton that literally destroyed devices that she used at the State Department, deleted emails, and refuses to release transcripts. So get it off the table and focus on Hillary Clinton's lack of transparency.
No wonder they both have record high negatives and disapproval ratings, historic highs. You know, it's sort of a hold your nose election, isn't it? All right, Charlie Kirk, Kerry Sheffield, thank you both for being with us.
Thank you.
All right.
All right, well, believe it or not, there is much more at stake in November than just the presidential election. Key races across the country could change the balance of power on Capitol Hill. Analysts say the Republican majority in the House could even dwindle, and Democrats could regain control of the Senate. Kristen Fisher live for us in Washington with what we can expect. These are some big races we're talking about, Kristen.
Yeah, they are, Abby. And let's start in Nevada, where current Senate Minority Leader Harry Reid will not be running for re-election. So to fill the vacancy, he's handpicked his Democratic successor, former Nevada Attorney General Catherine Cortez Masto. Now, she's running against Republican Joe Heck. So in this race, the Latino vote, and therefore the Trump factor, is going to be very important. And this seat, Harry Reid's old seat, is one that Democrats will almost certainly have to win if they want to gain control of the Senate in November. Now, another race that we're watching is the one one of the Senate seats in New Hampshire. This race is especially fascinating because it pits a popular sitting governor against a well-liked incumbent senator. The Democratic governor, Maggie Hassan, is taking on Republican Senator Kelly Ayotte. And then let's talk about this Senate race in the big battleground state of Ohio. You've got Republican Throb Portman battling it out against a Democratic former governor, Ted Strickland. Interesting side note here, Strickland actually lost the governor's race in 2010 to current governor John Kasich. Finally, let's head to Wisconsin, where current Senator, Republican Ron Johnson, is facing a challenge from Democrat Russ Feingold. This race, it's going to be interesting because it's really a rematch for these two. Johnson actually ousted Feingold back in 2010. So, Abby, not only could that race tip the power in the Senate, it could also be a highly contentious one as well.
A lot of races to follow. Also, Marco Rubio.
Yeah.
A lot of people are wondering what's going on there in Florida.
Right. Well, remember, part of the reason that Marco Rubio changed his mind and decided not to retire from the Senate is because he said he knew that control of the Senate may very well come down to the race in Florida. So this is a very important race. After the primaries last week, Rubio will now be facing Democratic Congressman Patrick Murphy. Murphy has come under fire for allegedly lying about some of his business dealings, but this race could be very close. The latest Real Clear Politics average of polls right now has Rubio ahead by about 6 points, Abby.
Well, if you're not following this races now, you certainly should start. Kristen Fisher, thanks for being with us this morning.
Thank you.
Now back to the race for the White House, and Hillary Clinton's running mate is defending her amid new questions about her private email server. Virginia Senator Tim Kaine says discerning what is and isn't classified information, he says it's not all that simple. Brian Yennis is live in our New York newsroom with more on that. Brian, what else is Senator Kaine saying in her defense?
Hi, Greg. Well, it's not just Senator Kaine. It's the entire Clinton campaign, which is saying they welcome the release of these notes from the FBI's interview of Hillary Clinton and the investigation into her private email practices because it proves why the FBI found that she did not intentionally mishandle classified information. Clinton said roughly 40 times that she could not recall key details like training on handling classified documents, did not understand the C markings on emails meant classified confidential information, and did not realize drone strike discussions were classified. Listen to her running mate, Tim Kaine, yesterday.
When she received the email, the material that was classified, which is supposed to be flagged and identified as classified, in many instances was improperly labeled. Unless it is specifically pulled out and identified, it is difficult to know sometimes whether a statement or a paragraph is classified or not. And that's what she was saying.
Greg, Tim Kaine is saying, look, I'm on 2 subcommittees in the Senate. I look at tons of information, and sometimes there's so much material, it's tough to discern what's classified or not. Greg?
You know, Brian, Donald Trump's campaign is beginning to jump all over this, right?
That's right. We're hearing from Donald Trump. He's tweeted last night, quote, lying Hillary Clinton told the FBI that she did not know the C markings on documents stood for classified. How can this be happening? Trump advisor, former New York City Mayor Rudy Giuliani, even saying this shows Clinton is not mentally or physically fit to be commander-in-chief.
We have only 2 answers to why she doesn't know, why the Secretary of State of the United States doesn't know that a C in front of a paragraph means confidential information. 1, she's stupid, or 2, she's lying. Or possibly 3, her brain injury has made her incompetent. I don't know. I happen to think it's the middle one.
The first debate is on September 26th. One can certainly guarantee these FBI notes will be a part of Trump's debate strategy. Greg?
You can, that's a safe bet. Okay.
Safe bet, exactly.
Yeah, Brian Yennis, Brian, thanks.
Yeah.
All right, well, soccer star Megan Rapinoe becoming the latest athlete to stay seated for the national anthem. This, of course, after NFL player Colin Kaepernick causing controversy when he refused to stand for the anthem last month. The 49ers quarterback saying he did it to protest racial injustice in the U.S., and President Obama defending Kaepernick during a news conference this morning. Listen.
He's exercising his constitutional right to make a statement when it comes to the flag and the national anthem and the meaning that that holds for our men and women in uniform and those who fought for us. That is a tough thing for them to get past, to then hear what his deeper concerns are. If nothing else, what he's done is he's generated more conversation around some topics that need to be talked about.
That he certainly has. Well, Christine is the deputy online editor of the Weekly Standard and joins us now. Happy Labor Day, sir. Thanks for being here.
Thank you very much. Same to you.
So, you know, you watch President Obama talk about it, and you think about the reactions from the other presidential candidates. It seems like no one really wants to touch this one.
Yeah, there's good reason why, too, Abby. Colin Kaepernick in his original statement said that Hillary Clinton essentially belongs in prison, using the same line of attack that a lot of other people have used with regard to the FBI stuff. So she's not going to be getting a field pass to the Niners game on Monday, I don't think. Tim Kaine said essentially that, look, like President Obama said, he has a right to say this, but Kaine said, quote, "I don't think it makes a whole lot of sense." And then you hear Donald Trump several days ago saying that, you know, we hear this every 4 years. If, you know, Colin Kaepernick doesn't like what the United States has to offer, then maybe he should get lost and go find another country.
That doesn't sound anything like Trump.
Yeah, exactly right. Exactly right. We've only gotten used to it for 15 months now. So none of these candidates are really touching it.
No, interesting. So you have Megan Rapinoe, the soccer player who knelt yesterday in the game. She's been trending on Twitter ever since. Certainly people are talking about that now. The story is not dying. And you have Kaepernick, his jersey sales are just now through the roof. So to President Obama's point, I mean, they are stirring up controversy and conversation. People are talking about them personally, but does this actually lead to positive change? I think that's the big question everyone's wondering from all this.
Right, and if you look at the context of this, you know, Colin Kaepernick was just named the backup quarterback of his team. Megan Rapinoe, who is a U.S. international star for the women's soccer team, actually did this during one of her domestic league's games. So when you have these sorts of stages that are maybe a little smaller and it's the gesture that we look at a little more, that's what's making it trend on social media. We have to go back to July and look at an example of like LeBron James, a megastar in the NBA, and Carmelo Anthony at an ESPN award show. They were the ones being a little more quiet, being a little more reasoned in their statements that they made, and that's the sort of thing that you would expect to carry this sort of conversation forward if we're looking to athletes to be the ones using their platforms.
Yeah, where does this go from here? I mean, we get to the point where more and more athletes follow their lead, because the reason the soccer player did it, she said that she thought the way that Kaepernick was treated was really disrespectful, and she wanted to prove that point and show that she could do it as well. Do you think we're going to see more athletes continue to kneel during the national anthem, and then is this story going to go on? And ultimately, how does that help anything?
Sure, I would expect the story itself to go on. We might see all manner of gestures. One of the interesting things in sports the last 2-3 decades is that ever since they've become so commercialized and branding has taken over, Michael Jordan had the alleged infamous comment back in the 1990s that, well, Republicans buy sneakers too, so you have to be cautious about what it is you say, speaking out about social activism. In the social media era, we see people like Carmelo Anthony and LeBron now, and then these people like Colin Kaepernick who generate a lot of conversation among the public on Twitter and across social media. So when they know that their message is having an impact, you would definitely expect the conversation to be continued in any manner that they choose to protest.
Yeah, well, his jerseys are selling out. I don't know what people are doing with them, but he's certainly gaining a lot of that attention. But Christine, thanks for being with us. Have a good day.
Thanks, Abby. You too.